Hello. Um, my name is Piotr Lewandowski, and I'm going to tell you a bit about Godzilla. Uh, One thing I want to make clear, I am not able to tell everything about Godzilla in an hour, but I will try to say some things that you may know, may not know, and try to answer the questions that were in the description. So first question, how many of you have saw any Godzilla movie? At least one. Okay, that's good. How many of you have saw the first Godzilla movie? Okay, that's quite a number. I thought there would be less people like that. Okay, so who is Godzilla or what is Godzilla, depending on how you look at it? Obviously, it's a rubber monster. We all know that. And it's been a rubber monster since 1954. That's the first time the first movie was created at that year. And it's a kaiju, so literally it means strange monster. At first, this was used in literature to describe any kind of monsters, mythology type of things, if I remember correctly. And later on, it was adapted into a movie genre. Basically, all those rubber monsters, Godzilla, Gamera, all of that, and some people always also talk about the Ultraman, Power Rangers, also treat it as that, but let's keep it simple. Let's say that it's Godzilla is a kaiju. 32 movies with 3 animated movies that you can see on Netflix, and that gives us 29 movies to watch also. And also 4 adaptations at least. Adaptations are basically these are American, and I think Italian was once. It basically is that they took the movie, edited it, and made it more accessible to some audiences. The first Godzilla movie was done like that. The 1984 Godzilla movie was done like that. And 2 more, I don't remember which one. One was for Italy, and one was something else. We'll talk about them a bit later. And we have 3 foreign movies and 1 planned that should be out next week, if I'm correct. I hope so. And some animated TV shows in the 70s and in the 1997-98. There was a series, and one of the series was actually based on the American movie, more or less, and not on the original Japanese Godzilla. And there's a lot of guest appearances in many TV shows that I will try to mention also, and also games. A lot of them are like fighting games on consoles and stuff. A lot of that. I'm not really a fan of those games, but I need to mention them. The Japanese name is actually Gojira or Gozira, depending how they spell it in the movie and which transliteration you choose. The Gojira one, the first one is the Hepburn, and the other one is, I forgot the name, but it's sometimes when you listen to the actors, you will see they actually say Gozira with a Z, not G. And it's also helping ladies when they need help. So, how did Godzilla came to be? 1954, yes, we had a guy named Tomiyuki Tanaka. He was a movie producer, and he was actually traveling from Philippines. He went to the Philippines, and he wanted to make a movie about Japanese involvement in the Philippines, which the Philippines didn't really like because it was 9 years after the war, and Japanese say, we'll come here, we'll make a movie about what was happening here, we'll tell it from our perspective. And the Philippines was actually like, I don't think so. So he was traveling back from there, and he had two things in his mind. One was a Lucky Dragon 5, which was actually not very lucky, but we'll talk about it in a second. And this is the boat, actually. The left photo is around 1950. The right one is in a museum. Why is this ship in a museum? Well, the Americans, as you know, probably were testing atomic bombs. And to test atomic bombs, you need a lot of free space. So they chose Bikini Atoll. You know probably the name, you heard it. And they were conducting an experiment called Castle Bravo. This was one of the first thermonuclear bomb experiments in the world, basically. Everything about atomic bombs was usually first. And what happened is that during that Castle Bravo experiment, they miscalculated a bit. They miscalculated a bit around, they thought that the bomb would be 6 megatons. It was 12.5 megatons. So just a little bit error, but because of that, the people that were supposed to be in the safe zone were not actually in the safe zone. They didn't die, but according to what they wrote in their memoirs, because of the strength of the explosion, some of the atoll was destroyed, and it started snowing, so to say, with burnt coral, you know, like what was the atoll built from, and it started dropping onto the ship. And the sailors, they didn't know what was happening, so they started cleaning the ship, and it was all radioactive material, basically. It was irradiated by the explosion. And they started cleaning the ship because they heard the explosion, but they didn't know what was going on. They started cleaning the ship, and they felt ill after some time. They went back to Japan, and they got sick. They got radiation poisoning. I think, yeah, everyone except for one person actually survived, so it wasn't that bad. One person died, but not from the radiation itself. They died from some after effects. I mean, not like from the radiation, not poisoning. Something else happened, and they had to. There was also a problem with some diseases. I don't remember the names, so I'm really sorry, but I forgot the names. But they had some illnesses. After that, they were alive. They lived till their 80s, 90s. They wrote memoirs about that incident, except for one person. And that was the thing at the time, basically. They were thinking about it. And one more thing. So that was one thing. The incident that was a hot topic, so to say. And the other thing is The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which is a movie about a walking lizard from beneath the sea. And that guy that we talked about earlier was flying back, and he thought, maybe we can use this somehow. And he got an idea for a giant monster from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That was the original pitch that he showed. That was the name of the pitch that he showed to the movie, to the studio, to the Toho Studios. And there is also another guy, Eiji Tsubaraya. He was the person responsible for making special effects at the same studios. And 3 years earlier, he also had a similar idea. So they got together, started working on this, And they created basically these two things, and parts of the ideas for Eiji Tsuburaya were used to create the first Godzilla movie. So we had the Tomoyuki Tanaka, we had Eiji Tsuburaya. So we need a director, Ishiro Honda. And also very important for the movie is the sound and music done by Akira Ifukube. This is actually not from the first movie, this is from the second movie, but you can see just something to fill the screen. So we had those 4 people, and maybe something more about them. Tomoyuki Tanaka, who was the producer, started work in 1940, and he produced over 200 movies during his lifetime. And basically, until his death, he was the producer for all Godzilla, and not only Godzilla. I will mention about it a bit more. Movies that were made by Toho Studios, which were creators of Godzilla. And he worked with Honda and Tsuburaya, and the marketing team used the term Golden Trio just to name them so it will sell better, because apparently, they were remembered they were known for their movies, yes. And they also did some interesting movies like Matango, much later, that's 1963, which is a very interesting movie about walking fungus. Very interesting movie. Why is it interesting? It's the darkest of their movies. I watched it. It's very strange. It's kind of a psychological horror, something like that. And really interesting because obviously there were no computers at that time. So all the sets were done by people, and it's really funny to look at the set. I mean, interesting to look at the set when you think that this is just another rubber tree and it starts moving half the scene, because the actor was super still. You couldn't see him move, and then he starts moving. So like no CGI, nothing. Interesting movie. You could watch it. And also he worked with Akira Kurosawa, if you know this guy. And he was the producer for Kagemusha. For this movie, Akira Kurosawa won the Golden Palm in the Cannes in 1980. So he worked with some interesting people. And this is the poster for Kagemusha. So we have Eiji Tsuburaya. He worked since 1919 in the movie. Sorry, I need to check my time. And he became head of special effects for Toho in 1938, yes. He started working small, then he moved up, and he also worked for the war effort. He worked for all the propaganda movies. Really interesting fact, he did such good work with some of his movies, like this one, you can see. They were done so good that the Americans thought that they bought the videos from their own American recording companies, because they thought that it's so good, so real, obviously for 1940 standards, that they thought that someone in the USA sold them some videos so they could use it in their propaganda movies. Yeah. And also, really important, he was the inventor of the rubber monsters, basically. And this was done to save time and money. I will talk about it a bit later. And he also created something interesting, Ultra Q, which is the precursor to, oh, sorry, yeah. Do you recognize this one? This is Ultra Q, first episode of Ultra Q. This was done after Godzilla, and he actually used a Godzilla suit from one of the movies, added some elements, and made his own TV show about it. And after that, he also created Ultraman. Some of you may know it, since Ultraman is still being created. It's one of those shows that's similar to Power Rangers, like this. And they still create it till this day. So he also created this kind of shows that have those strange monsters with lights everywhere. It's strange. So we have the director. Yeah, he took part in the war effort. I think he was called to the front at least 2 or 3 times. He was in China, in Manchukuo. He had some luck. Sometimes I think at least once he averted his death because he missed his boat or something. Otherwise he would be dead. And he worked also with Akira Kurosawa, which is also interesting because it seems that they all were working together somehow if you look at all their work. And yeah, he was the director of the original Godzilla movie. Yeah, and he also worked on Kagemusha, but he worked as the second crew or something. It's called like that. So we have the main crew with Akira Kurosawa and the other that was doing some extra work, and he worked there. And he also worked on Ultraman. I mean, this is Return of Ultraman, which is third or fourth series in that. I don't know how many are by now because I believe there are at least 30 or 40. And he worked on documentaries also. He did some work on some spelling documentaries, stuff like that. And last person, my favorite, Akira Ifukube. He wanted to be composer at age of 14, but actually he finished, and he was a self-taught composer, but actually he finished studies in forestry. He was a forester by trade. He was working for the Japanese government, obviously, during the war. And yeah, as I said, sorry, I had to move those slides. And he had to abandon forestry because of radiation incident, because he was doing forestry work. He was researching wood elasticity, if I remember correctly, to be used in the war effort, to check if they can make some cheap replacements with wood. But due to lack of proper equipment, he was radiated and he couldn't work anymore. And he composed over 250 scores for different occasions, for movies, non-movies. And at the end of his career, he actually fought at the Tokyo University of Arts, and then he moved to Tokyo College of Music, and I think he was the dean of that university. Despite he didn't really receive any musical education, he became one of the head of the Department of Music, something like that. So he was very, very talented. And he obviously created the Godzilla main theme, the Godzilla March, which is also considered a main theme because some movies used one of these, some movies used the other of these in variations. And he created the steps and the roar of Godzilla. Does anyone know how the steps of Godzilla were created? No. Okay, so the steps of Godzilla were created by taking an amplifier. I think it's like the ones that they use for guitars, just hitting it on the side and recording that sound. That's how they made the steps. Okay, anyone know how the roar was created? Okay, so the roar was created, I mean, it's a mix of his musical and forestry skills because he took a double bass or what sometimes is called contrabass. I'm not sure how it's called in Czech. It's contrabass or double bass. He took a string from it and then took a glove covered in wood resin and started scratching around that string. And he recorded that, and that's how you create Godzilla roar. You can do it at home probably. Some sources say that it's also a bit slowed down. Some sources don't mention that slowing down. So if you have a contrabass and some wood sap or something, you can try it. Okay, and now we have the first movie, 1954. So they got together, they started creating the movie. This is the original poster with all the main characters. Here's the most important one, the other important persons, and obviously Godzilla destroying, I think it was Tokyo in that movie. So the filming itself took 51 days, but also special effects took 71 days. It's very, when they calculated how much it would take if they wanted to make it in stop motion with, like every frame on itself, they calculated for this movie it would take 3.5 years, and they managed to do it in 71 days. So we can see why they chose this method over the other. Some of the things that you see in the videos, if you watch the movie, you will see there's a lot of Japanese self-defense force, because obviously they cannot have their own army, so they call it Japanese self-defense force. Were filmed when they were doing practices. They came to the defense force and they said, okay, we want to film you. So they said, okay, we will do some exercises, and what you see are not actors, they are actual soldiers that were practicing for something else, but it fits the film, so they are fine with that. And the movie was kind of success. 8th best movie of that year with almost 10 million tickets sold. So it was okay for them. It was okay for them enough to make another movie in a year. Yeah, in a year or 2 years. Godzilla Rides Again. But actually, it had bad reviews at the start. People said that it is too short from the war to when it was released to be okay. They thought it's not okay to have this much distraction in Japan at this time after the war. Just 9 years after the war, 2 atomic bombs were dropped, and everyone saying, and the reviewers said it's not fine. But the movie was getting better reviews in the USA, and then they said, okay, maybe it's not that bad. So people actually started going to that movie, and it was not, it finished in a pretty good spot, I think. And later on, I think it was 2 years later or a year later, the Americans actually took that movie, because at first they were showing the original Japanese version, and then they did what they call adaptation, which means they cut out parts of the movie that they thought was not good for American audiences, and they filmed it with their own actor, American actor, and some, some other people that were not showing their faces or were not needed for the plot, and they created basically their own plot using the scenes of destruction with Godzilla and the American actor. And it's not good. Don't watch it. Don't watch it. And this is the American version. So yeah, it was more on the distraction and stuff. And it was called Godzilla King of Monsters. So if you see somewhere Godzilla King of Monsters, it's probably the American version. If you see just Godzilla, it means it's the Japanese version, probably. It's sometimes hard to find all the versions. And now, I think, yeah, so the most important question, why was Godzilla so popular and what it meant to the Japanese people? So the easiest and the most important answer is that Godzilla is basically the atomic bomb slowed down. Do I have it here? Yeah. It was the raw energy of the bomb that was turned into the animal, to the monster, and that monster started walking slowly because obviously it couldn't just wipe the city. So it started moving slowly, destroying everything. If you watch the movie, you will see that it's not only the destruction that is shown, but it's after effects. You will see destroyed cities. You will see people with radiation because Godzilla's breath in that movie is radioactive. So they will say, oh, this person is irradiated. This place is destroyed. And what's more, people cannot do anything about it. It works slowly, but it's relentless. It cannot be stopped. In the movie, most of the movie, it cannot be stopped. But that's what it was. And also another explanation, which is similar, it's a man-made tragedy because Godzilla was not created by nature. It was created in the movie. It is said that it's created by atomic tests that wake up some prehistoric monster that mutates and starts destroying. That's why it's radioactive. That's why its breath is radioactive. So it was pretty short time between the atomic bombs and release of Godzilla. So people looked at it as a reminder, sort of this, because as the bomb is unrelentless, it destroys everything, and it's man-made, so was Godzilla. But it was slower, but still it had all those characteristics of that destruction. Yeah, people were still aware of radiation, of what it meant, what it did to people. Obviously, they met those people. So some, like the producer, said that it's also nature's revenge on people for that destruction. Since at the beginning it was the atomic bomb that woke Godzilla up, so now that destruction woke that energy that started destroying people in revenge. And another explanation is that Godzilla was simply the United States. Because the United States had the bomb, so if they dropped the bomb, Godzilla was a representation of the destructive force that the bomb had in itself. Any questions? Because, okay. Okay, and one more question. Do you have your own interpretation of Godzilla? Or do you think these are good or these are bad? Okay. Okay. So after that movie, as I said, it was quite a good success, and the whole series started. And it is divided into parts. I put specifically the first movie outside of any way of dividing it, because I believe this movie is a separate entity. I mean, it has some continuity with the other movies, but due to the nature and the way that movie was created, I think it's much better to treat it as a separate entity. And then we have the so-called Showa period. This lasted until 1975, and I don't have. I will look at. So we had some movies. I will look at it. Maybe I have some notes. No, I will not find it right now. Okay. Anyway, there was a number of movies done at that period. Sorry, and those movies were going from very serious. The first one, the second was Godzilla Rides Again. which was, if you remember the shot, when I showed you the actor in the costume half open, there were two monsters actually, because the other one was the Anguirus, how you call it. It was based on a different dinosaur. It had the spikes on their back, and it walked on 4 legs. And it was the next movie, and then the next movie. Yeah, I need to look it up. Sorry. Yes, refreshing my memory. And the next movie was the best selling, best viewed, biggest box office. It was called King Kong versus Godzilla. And it actually started creating more and more funny Godzilla. It started to make it more accessible to kids, and more it started moving it forward more. It dropped all that nostalgia, all that fear about atomic energy, everything. It just became, basically it became a wrestling movie at the end. If you look at it, at the very end, the monsters, they fight like they are on some kind of ring. Sorry, I forgot the English name. The place where the combatants fight, basically. Arena, yeah. They basically look like they're fighting the arena. They also do those poses. The King Kong does, like, he prepares for fight like that. So they look like they fight on the arena, and they just walk around. The movie is very strange because it ends like that. They destroy one building, and they go away. Okay, let's go. One goes one way, when the other one goes the other way. There's a lot of stupid scenes in that movie, like when they put the King Kong to sleep, and then they attach 6 balloons to it, and King Kong goes up, and they start pushing him, and he floats to a mountain where he will fight Godzilla. Or one more, my favorite scene is when they start throwing rocks at each other, and at the very end, they just grab each other, and I think it was King Kong that grabs a tree, and it's a rubber tree, and it's all wibbly wobbly, and it starts pushing it into Godzilla's mouth. And it's like, oh. Really stupid film. I'm sorry. And it goes worse and worse from that moment. I mean, it's not worse, it's different. They start fighting different monsters, aliens. There's a smog monster, which rains acid rain that turns people into skeletons. There's one movie in which there's a mangaka who draws different monsters, and they use his skill to fool the aliens, and they do it by doing a one-to-one picture of people, and they put it into the elevator, put TNT behind it, and they open the elevator, see the drawing, it's just like, lines drawn, and they, oh my god, it's people, and start shooting, and the TNT explodes, and it's an amusement park, so a head of Godzilla explodes in an amusement park, and another one stands behind it. It's crazy. So they are more on the fun side, so to say. And it ended in 1975. And then there was a pause until 1984. And in 1984, there was another movie simply called Godzilla, which basically dropped everything that happened in Showa period and rebooted the series, remembering about the first movie. It was designed as a direct sequel to the first movie. And it was okay. After that, there was like Godzilla versus Biollante or King Ghidorah. So they basically, except for the first the Biollante, all the movies started reusing the aliens, the monsters from the previous movies, but they had their own continuity. And this ended in 1995, where we have the so-called millennium period. These movies usually dropped what was happening in Heisei period and started to be sequels to the first movie, but forgetting about the other movie. So like direct sequels to the first movie, direct sequel to the first movie, and so on. Sometimes they were interlocking, so it was strange. They started to use more and more CGI in those movies, but not for the Godzilla, but for rockets, for airplanes, stuff like that. And it ended in what was called Final Wars, which was a movie that tried to use all the monsters in the Godzilla universe, basically. They even used the American one, because it was after the American one, so they used it, and there was a scene where the real Godzilla kills the American Godzilla. And it ended at that point. And then we have the Reiwa period, which started in 2016 with Shin Godzilla. And now we have 3 movies, also 3 animated movies, and we are waiting for more, if I'm correct with my counting. Question, do you know where these names come from?
Japanese emperors.
Yes, exactly. These are Japanese emperors. They are not strictly aligned with the eras, but that's how the naming was created, basically. Like the first movie, I think the Reiwa was announced quite recently, and the movie was added to that period after. Yes, yes. So it basically it doesn't really align, but they use it to mark the periods, and it actually made some sense to use those periods because of how the movies were created. Hello. Okay. Yes, this is one of my favorite movies. As you can see, it's King Kong versus Godzilla. It was the first color movie for both of the monsters, because King Kong was, up to that time, was only done in black and white. Yes, and as I said, it was a hit. It was the best box office movie of the Godzilla franchise. And as I said, it was more comedic, and people, yeah, and it was with. Yeah, this is an interesting picture. It's a priest, this one here. He was blessing the crew and the monsters before they started filming that movie. So they got the priest, and he blessed everyone, and that's how it looked. And the first concept was for King Kong versus Frankenstein. Fun fact, those guys that I told you, the Golden Trio, they also did Frankenstein. And it was a Frankenstein monster, and that movie was called Frankenstein Conquers the World. It was a movie about German self-beating heart that was transplanted into someone's body, that reanimated that body, and that body started growing into the size of King Kong or Godzilla. Great concept. And then, that's not all. They did another movie where they had 2 Frankenstein monsters, 50 meters high each. And they were fighting. It's called War of the Gargantuas. Great movie. I mean, their storytelling is sometimes great. And this is another fun shot. This is a real octopi here. This is the director, And this is the trainer for the octopi, and they're trying to force it to destroy those houses here. Because in the movie, the octopi, in the beginning of the movie, the octopi tries to capture some people and destroy the village. So they used the real octopi and they filmed it to destroy those houses. This is another important movie. This is the 1989 movie. As I said, it's a reboot of sorts because it remembers the first movie. It's also start of the Heisei series. It was sort of a success as usual, and it's fun fact. This movie was also adapted by the USA, by the American guys, and they actually did it the same way. So they got the actor that was in the 1954 re-adaptation, and they filmed him for this adaptation too. So we have direct continuity in the American version adaptations as with the Japanese ones. Yeah, and some free movies. The first one had, yeah, they put a lot of money into making the music. How many of you saw those movies? Okay, the first one. I don't remember. I don't want to remember that movie. The first one had a good music. The second was also bad, but it had some nice shots. I really liked the shots, and everyone that saw that movie that I know said that the shots, the colors, there's a really nice shot where they fire the flares, and there's a lot of people jumping down and stuff. Really nice shots, but also not a good movie. And I hope the next one will be better. Yeah. Okay. Also, Godzilla had children. One looked like that, and it was a comedic relief in a comedic movie. It was really bad, but it was used in some movies to force Godzilla to do something. And also Godzilla Jr., which I don't know how he got from this to this, but he eventually ended up as another Godzilla. Because at one point Godzilla gets beaten, and his junior, we don't know what sex it is, so we call it Junior. Junior took over the role of Godzilla. King Ghidorah, really important monster for the series because it's one of the most iconic ones, and the one that you will probably see in the new movie. You can see those 3 heads. If you look at the trailer, there will be 3 heads, so it's King Ghidorah. 3-headed monster. Yeah, it has many origins. One movie, it comes from the Mars. One movie, they took 3 space furies, took it to the past, then they left it where the atomic bomb exploded, so they fused, and they moved them to future, and then they moved them to back to destroy humanity. Yes, Mothra, another important. Actually, Mothra had her own movies, standalone movies without Godzilla. Because if you see King Ghidorah something, it usually means that King Ghidorah is fighting with Godzilla and someone. And Mothra has her own movies with no Godzilla. This is 2 forms. This is larva, and this is the moth. It's called Imago. I don't know why it's called like that, but it's called Imago form. Yes, also twin fairies. They sang in the movies. They usually sing, but they don't sing in Japanese. In the first movie, they sing in Philippines language, And later on, it was translated into Japanese, and in later movies, they sing. Those fairies are usually important to the plot because they are able to communicate with Mothra. And there's also Bafra, which looks like that. That's evil, but it's not evil, it's just not understood, as most monsters are not understood by people. Bafra came to destroy everyone, but actually it wants to go to space to stop a comet or something that wants to destroy humanity. And very important, another monster that is also important is Gamera. Gamera was not created by Toho Studios. It was created by another, but I forgot the name. And Gamera is this guy here. The other one is something that was not very lucky. So it's a giant turtle from space that has jet engines for legs. That's exactly how it looks. And that's how, yes, it looks the same. It hides those legs, and jet flames start to pour from her holes where the legs were supposed to be, and in one move it actually starts spinning around and going like that, spinning around space. It feeds on fuel-like substances, so coal, oil, wood, everything, and it supposedly helps her breathe fire. And Gamera was from the beginning designed as a protector of children, of humanity, be it from something on Earth or in space. In some movies, Gamera goes to space stations and goes there and helps people there, obviously children that are abducted by aliens or something like that. But it is also always good, never bad. Interesting fact, there's more blood in those movies than in most Godzilla movies. In Godzilla movies, except for some exceptions, you will not see much blood. You will just see, the hand can go off, but not really with blood or something like that. Or the enemy will be just lying on the floor and he will be beaten. But in these movies, where there's like projectiles or something, blood will start pouring everywhere. And the enemies were a bit odd. One, and my favorite, it's actually from the later part of the movie, because here you can see this point here. It's a place where he had shurikens, and he shot the shurikens from there. I don't know how, but he managed to do it. Yeah, so we have Knife Man and Silver something. I don't know if I can recommend you these movies, but for the fun factor, yes. Because one movie, you have Gamera, and he's being thrown by another monster, and he flies across the screen, 3 shots of screen. And then he goes between 2 buildings, which are accidentally connected by a bar. And he grabs that bar and starts doing acrobatics on that bar. He's just rolling around one way, another, and he jumps, and he finishes like, that's how he works. So as I said, it's not very adult movie, but for the fun factor, yes. So music, as I said, do I have? Yeah. Oh, great. So we have the main theme, which was created for the first movie. We have the Godzilla March. If you look on the internet, it's sometimes really hard to discern, because sometimes people will write it's Godzilla main theme and it's March, and sometimes they write March and it's main theme. These are used interchangeably between movies with different variations. So we have like, with time they changed something, but the main, the core of the music was left there. And also, this is what I really like. This is the Prayer for Peace. Prayer for Peace was used only in the first movie, and it's a really important part of the movie, because this is played when, as we talked before, we had those, as I said before, Godzilla was destroying the city, but the movie was not also only about destroying, but seeing the effects. And when we have a long, long shot, when they show destroyed cities, people burned or whatever, this is what is being played at that moment. And it took a choir of, I think, 1,000 kids singing it. And it's also very important because this piece of music is in the movie. It's broadcasted in the TV, and one of the main characters decides to try to do something about Godzilla. I don't know how much do you want to see this movie, but this is really important part of the plot. Pushes the plot forward. We could go for one. We could try the prayer for peace. The second, I think it was the second link. Second. Oh, it's working.
Yes. But this is the first one.
Okay.
I'll click the second one.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sure.
Just need to start it on again and then Shift F5. Sorry. You can go to the Shift F5. It starts from that point.
Yeah.
And yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Can you skip 20 seconds? Yeah. Something like here. So, as I said, this is the most important, I think, for me, part of the movie. You can see translation here, sort of. This text also here, it also reminds of the main themes of the movie. So the destruction, the death, destruction, and stuff like that, which is reflected in the words of the song. Obviously, we don't have that much time, but if you have a minute, and you can look up on YouTube, look for Prayer for Peace Akira Ifukube or Prayer for Peace Godzilla, and you will find the song with translation possibly, so you can see what is. If you don't know Japanese, obviously it's easier with translation. And we can also play the main theme, this one. Let's see. If I... Yes, this is the main theme of the movie. This is used throughout other movies also. So if you listen closely and then go to thank you. If you listen closely to that music and then go through other movies, you will find this or the other song in many, many variations throughout the movies. As I said, we have 13-something movies, so there was a space for the authors to experiment with this theme and the other one. Some shots from the first movie also. I almost forgot. Besides the cultural importance, as it's the first Godzilla movie, it's also it's also interesting to watch the movie because of the acting, and you can see Japan as it was after the war, because it was not staged, nothing was staged, so you can see how Japan looked at the time, because there are shots of the cities before destruction, obviously. And I would say I would recommend to watch this movie. at least once to see it, to because you can look at it as just a distraction movie, or you can look at it as a movie that was done to help Japanese people cope with the war of sorts, and also to show those emotions that were with the Japanese people at that time. Because obviously for them, atomic bombs were very real. They had those bombs a few years ago. So you can watch this movie and see how those things reflected in the movie. Obviously, the acting is not very good. I mean, sorry?
It almost never is in Japanese movies. They can make anime, but they can.
Yeah, but the problem is that it's what I call old school acting. If you know Ben-Hur, the movie, they have the same style of acting, the more theatrical acting. You know, like no, yes, oh, everything like that. All the emotions are shown in the acting themselves, like in the. I call it old school acting. So I would really recommend for you to watch this movie. Obviously, it's not for. I mean, you can try watching it for entertainment, but it's what's not meant for entertainment. And I don't think you will, when you watch it, you will not really be able to look at it as I don't know, a comedy or something. I mean, it has you can laugh at some of the special effects, for example, and stuff like that. But you need to consider that it was done in a limited time, on a limited budget. So because of that, they invented the rubber suits. So there were some limitations there. But I still recommend for you to watch this movie at least once. I still have 3 more minutes? Okay. If you have such a possibility, do so. Okay, some stuff. Yes, so happiness is submission to Godzilla. Okay, some cultural impact, because it's really hard to. I think I could do a whole presentation just about the cultural impact of Godzilla, because it is such a known character. And it takes so many different stuff that can be put in there. First, just, sometimes people use this suffix to describe some zilla to mean something big. That's how this. That's how you create cultural impact. If you say, in some countries, you don't say portable player, you say Walkman, or you say Adidas for boots, which are sport boots. And this is also something that sometimes is used in certain situations. Music has been impacted by Godzilla. I personally like, a lot of songs. There's a band called Gojira. I think it's a metal band or something. There were records. There's a hip-hop record that is created mainly by taking samples from old versions of Godzilla movies with American actors speaking in those movies, and they took the samples from those movies and used it to create the music in the movie. The band or the project is called King Ghidorah, and it's the record is called "Take Me to Your Leader." So a lot of music has been, a lot of stuff has been impacted. Interesting. Bambi meets Godzilla. It's a movie. It's a 1-minute movie that was created for. It's an anti-war basically movie that lasts for a minute, and it looks like this. You have Bambi meets Godzilla. Bambi meets Godzilla foot, and then you have 45 seconds of credits. And this, And this movie actually got into the Congress library to be preserved as an important movie. There's also Revenge of Bambi or something like that, and one more movie which was called Son of Bambi or something like that. So lots of stuff. And also things I didn't write down here, but Godzilla is used in many cartoons. You can see Godzilla, or there's a Mecha Barbara Streisand in South Park, which is inspired by Mecha Godzilla. There's Godzilla is used frequently in The Simpsons, for example. Lots of places can. It is a very known character, so it's visible in different places. Yeah, questions, because we maybe have 1 more minute. Yes. King Ghidorah. Let me see. No, definitely no. King Ghidorah was first, I think, in Destroy All Monsters. Oh, sorry, no. Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, 1965. So, a lot of history. I mean, at least half of the movies were with Ghidorah because it was so popular. Any other question? Yes? With Godzilla, I think you could start with King Kong versus Godzilla. That would be very nice. Yeah, start with there. And basically, you can look at most of the Heisei era movies because they are more funny. So there's more space for crazy stuff. I don't know, like Godzilla turns back, goes like that, starts shooting flames from his mouth and flies away. So, so crazy stuff happens all the time. You had a question? 70s. 70s first. Yes. Sorry? Yes. I have my notes here. Mechagodzilla was in 1974, if I'm correct. It was created by the aliens, and it had a small flaw. When you remove the head, it stopped working. But they created the same Godzilla again, and this time, when you remove the head, it still worked. And Godzilla was like, I removed the head and nothing happened. And it had a special mechanism that shoot lasers when you remove the head. It had special laser just for that situation inside the head. Any more questions? Yes? I will be truthful here. I have had not enough time to watch all of it right now because I was very busy. It looks okay, but I want to finish all the 3 movies before I will give my final judgment. Life happens sometimes. Yes, any more questions? Weirdest. Let me look up. For Godzilla or general? For general, I think it would be. That's mixed because I think the weirdest one would be the Gargantuas that I mentioned earlier, where you have 2 giant Frankenstein monsters roaming the Japanese countryside, which is kind of weird. But you can also look at it with Godzilla. hard. I mean, there's a lot of them. I think one of the weirdest is the smog monster. I think his name was Hedora, I think. I'm not sure right now. Smog monster was a blob that then started flying and raining acid rain, then that turned people into skeletons. So it's kind of fun, I would say. The other ones are usually more combatant. I mean, you have like robots with chainsaws for arms or stuff like that, which is obviously not really what you meet every day, but it's more, it has its purpose. Yeah, you know, have, I will cut you up or something like that. So it serves a purpose. And with some, there's no purpose. And also Matango, because I like those mushrooms. And they look really interesting in the movie. I mean, it's not the best movie you will see, but it's also very interesting to, I mean, watch it, all those mushrooms stand still and start moving. Really nice effect. Any more? I think we're done. Yeah, thank you very much for your time.